Hi, it's been a while. This is the first video of that year, and if you already know my channel, you might be wondering why you haven't uploaded even a single video over the last 8 months, 9 months. We're gonna get to it in a minute. And for those of you who are new to my channel, I think most people who are watching this video are new to my channel, so let me tell you a bit of my journey before getting into the main topic, okay? I first started learning English. By the way, I'm Yuto, and I first started learning English when I was a sophomore in college. And back then, I was actually away from English for over a year. And then something happened. And it would take a while to explain the whole story. So, long story short, one of my friends at that time encouraged me to start learning English. And at first, I didn't know what to do. So I started also way most people would when getting into learning English, like taking online English classes or trying to practice speaking as much as possible, right? That's what most Japanese people do when getting into learning English. And I didn't get anywhere, which was not really surprising in hindsight. And that was when I happened to come across a video of a white guy speaking Japanese for straight 4 minutes. And his Japanese was so good that I was totally blown away. How come he's so good at Japanese? How did he learn Japanese? Then I started rummaging through his videos and eventually found out that he learned Japanese through immersion learning. So that's how I started learning English through immersion learning. And now, 4 years have passed since I made that decision. And for the first 3.5 years, as some of you might know, that I spent most of my time doing nothing but getting input. Like, I watched thousands of YouTube videos and dramas and TV shows, but mostly YouTube videos, and reading and read a decent amount of books, and I try to immerse myself with English content as much as possible, and try to avoid Japanese content as much as possible. And it wasn't until October 2024 that I started actively practicing speaking English. So it's been 8 months, 9 months since then. And to this day, I've never taken online English classes, or I've never been to a country where English is spoken. Yeah, so that's kind of my overview story. And for those of you who already know my channel, you might be wondering why I haven't uploaded a single video over the last 8 months, 9 months. So over the course of 8 months, 9 months, I have been working on something really interesting, which is my English immersion community. And we do a lot of things to help you learn English through immersion learning as effortlessly as possible. And also we do a lot of things you've definitely never heard of before. And it would take a while to explain everything, so we're not gonna get into it. So we'll leave this to the introduction video, okay? But one feature that might really interest you the most is that you no longer have to make flashcards during immersion right? So again, it would take a while to explain how this works. But to give you a quick idea, this system can save you up to 30 to no. Let me say this again. This system can save you around 30 to an hour every single day. And you can use that extra time to focus more on listening. So even if you have a busy schedule, you'll still be able to spend time on things that help you improve your English skills. We do that's just one example. We do so many things to help you improve your English skills. And if you're interested, please watch the next video, which, in my humble opinion, has the potential to change your life. So the goal with that video is to change the way you think about what it really takes to succeed in learning English. And the reason why I decided to make that video is because of the fact that there are so many different methods out there for learning English, at least on YouTube. But still, almost all Japanese people end up quitting, no matter what methods they use. And while very few people actually succeed. Right? Which leads to an important question. Why does this happen? Why do most Japanese people end up quitting while only a small handful succeed? Is that just the way it is? Or there is something deeper going on that we Japanese people don't know yet? Well, that's exactly what we'll be diving into in the next video. Okay, so if you're interested, please watch it. Wait. If you're interested in joining the community, watching the next video is mandatory. Because, one, what I talk about in that community, in that video, has everything to do with what we are doing in that community. So if you're trying to join the community without watching that video, you're gonna be at a loss. You are not gonna get why we are doing that. So please watch it, okay? And second, the only way for you to get access to the community is through the link in the description of the next video. Okay, so please make sure to watch it. Okay. And what else we got? Also, I've always been a fan of helping people in need, and when I was working on building that community, I started wondering, what if our English learning could help people in need? What if your immersion learning could actually help someone in some way? If I could make that happen, that would be awesome. So that's exactly what I did. So if you want to know what that means, be sure to watch the introduction video. Okay. And if you are in elementary school or junior high school or high school and your parents can't afford to let you join the community, no worries. You can join for free. So if you're someone who wants to learn English with me, The door is always open. Okay. Now we've gotten that out of the way. Let's get into the main topic, which I was gonna spend the majority of this video talking about. And before we get started, there is something I need to tell you. First, I have a bullet point to help me stay on the track, help me stay on track. Since this video is gonna be very long, which you can tell from the length of this video. So, sometimes I need to check where I am. So please don't mind when I look at it, okay? And second, as I keep speaking English, I will get tired. Since I can't take any break from start to finish in this video. So yeah. And there will be a moment where I'll be like, I think, right? So please keep an open mind. Okay, without further ado, let's get started. So the topic I'm talking about is about learning and acquisition. So not recently, I've always kind of been thinking that the reason why most Japanese people haven't been able to speak English is, most Japanese people say that the reason why we haven't been able to speak in English after spending 6 years learning English in school is because of the fact that it's because of a lack of output practice, right? We didn't get enough opportunities to speak in English classes, right? It totally makes sense, right? That's a fact. Wait, anyway. Well, we can get why most people feel that way. But as someone who has been doing immersion learning over 4 years, and given the fact that I basically went from 0 to this level within a span of 6 to 8 months, 9 months, I don't think that's the main reason. So let me explain what I mean by this. But to understand what I'm about to say, you need to have a rudimentary understanding of the distinction between learning and acquisition. So let's start with that. And after we've gotten the gist of the distinction, we're gonna get back to the main point. Okay? So first, learning. By learning, in this case, I'm referring to memorizing a bunch of vocabulary and grammar structures and trying to use them when speaking English. So what most Japanese people do when speaking English is to try to translate their thoughts in Japanese into English using grammar structures and words they've memorized from textbooks with the conscious part of their brain. And for the longest time, I thought that was the only way for us to speak English, right? And I used to use this approach all the time before I started using immersion learning, before I started doing immersion learning. And to be honest, there are so many problems with this approach. First of all, it takes time, right? It takes time to express your thoughts when you're translating, Because if you're constantly thinking about what you're trying to say in Japanese, you have to think about things like is the tense correct here? Is it ought to use this phrase in this situation? Or does this word conjugate differently? Stuff like that, right? There are so many things you need to think about before you are saying something in English. Okay? So that's the first one. And the second one is, I think this is a much bigger problem than the first one. So the accuracy of your expression, let me say this again. The accuracy of your expressions drops drastically when you are thinking in Japanese. And this happens to me to this day. When I find myself rely on Japanese, the English sentences I come up with always end up sounding unnatural. And the reason why this happens really comes down to the fact that different languages express the same basic ideas in completely different ways. So the more different each language is, the more different each expression is gonna be. Just like Japanese and English. So what does this mean? I mean, let me give an example comparing Japanese and English. Okay. So, I mean, this is an example Mappers Japan uses in one of his videos to explain this concept. So I'm not the first one who came up with it. So shout out to Mappers Japan. Okay. Anyway, back to what I was saying. Imagine a situation where you feel the urge to go to the bathroom. And if you were a child, what would you say to a mom? What would you say to a mom, to your friend, to your teacher in Japanese? You'd say, トイレ行きたい. Right? トイレ行きたい. Sounds completely natural to me as a Japanese. And if you literally translate this phrase トイレ行きたい into English, that would be I want to go to the bathroom. Right? I want to go to the bathroom. And if you're Japanese, this still might sound natural to you. But the thing is, native speakers never say that. Never say that. Instead, they say, I want to go to the bathroom. I need to go to... Why? Did I say I want to go to the bathroom? No. I have to go to the bathroom. I need to go to the bathroom. I need to use the bathroom. Rather than I want to go to the bathroom. So, as a Japanese, these phrases still might sound a bit odd to me. A bit off to me. Because, like many of you guys, I used to say the phrase that's equivalent to I want to go to the bathroom in Japanese growing up. So, it's still hard to imagine what it's like to have to go to the bathroom. Like, what if... let me say this again. Wait. It's still hard to imagine what it's like to have to go to the bathroom. Like, I can imagine what they feel like, right? When they say they have to go to the bathroom. But, anyway. So, it wasn't until I started using this method that I even became aware of the existence of these other expressions. Right? So they are still new to me. But I mean, what does I want to say? Wait. Please, let me check this.
Flowers have ultraviolet patterns invisible to humans to attract specific insects.
Oh, okay. Usually, native speakers say, I have to go to the bathroom, I need to go to the bathroom, I need to use the bathroom. And also there are so many other phrases to express that idea, such as take a leak. Like that's for number one. And take a D or S. That's for number two. So many other expressions, but usually they say I have to, I need to use. Okay? And the reason why Japanese people say I want to go to the bathroom while English speakers say I have to go to the bathroom, I need to use the bathroom, I need to go to the bathroom is because it's very simple. That's just the way it is. That's it. That's how the language works. There is no logical reason for it. That's just how the language works. So, the way we express ideas in a language has nothing to do with the definitions of the ideas themselves. If that makes sense. So, just because we feel like we want to go to the bathroom, that doesn't mean we are supposed to use the word that describes the feeling, want to, when expressing that idea in English. Did you get it? So, vice versa, the same goes in the opposite direction. So just because they feel like they have to go to the bathroom, that doesn't mean they are supposed to use a word that is equivalent to have to when expressing that idea in Japanese. So the point I'm trying to make with those examples is that, no matter how hard you try to translate, no matter how hard you try to shorten the time it takes to translate your thoughts in Japanese into English, as long as you're thinking in Japanese, you will end up sounding unnatural 9 times out of 10. The English sentences you'll come up with based on Japanese are very likely to be unnatural. That's how the language works. This is not my opinion. This is not my speculation. This is not my speculation. That's how the language works. Okay? Let me give you another example. There's this phrase in Japanese, 秘密を守る, right? 秘密を守る. If you translate this phrase, 秘密を守る, into English, it becomes something like protect a secret, guard a secret, right? And like always, native speakers never say that. They say, if they want to express that idea in English, they'd say, keep a secret. Or, could you promise not to say a word about this to anyone? Or, this is just between you and me, right? Or this is just between us, right? Stuff like that. So, think about it. How could you possibly predict that native speakers would say, I have to go to the bathroom when you are translating the phrase, this phrase, I トイレ行きたい which means I want to go to the bathroom into English, right? You can't predict how native speakers would say something when you are thinking in Japanese. So the only way for us to become able to express that idea, our thoughts, in the same way natives do, is to know exactly how native speakers would express that idea ahead of time. That's the only way. And I don't think we can learn this from textbooks. I mean, technically, we can learn expressions and phrases, right? So we can learn to a certain degree. But I think that's never gonna be enough for us to actually become able to get to the point where we can express ourselves in the same way natives do and speak English in the same way we speak Japanese. So to get to this level, if you want to get to this level, you need to get a sheer amount of exposure to English to cultivate an intuition for what English is supposed to sound like. I think that's the only way. I don't know about you, but I think that's the only way for us to get there. So that's how I acquired our first language, Japanese. And that's how I acquired English. And that's how I became able to speak in English without translating. Because like I said, for the first 3.5 years, I spent doing nothing but getting input. I mean, now that I think about it, I shouldn't have put off speaking English so much, so long. I should have started way earlier. But in the grand scheme of things, 1 year or 2, I think doesn't make any difference. So, I'm not concerned about it for now. Anyway, where were we? Anyway, which leads us to the second topic, which is acquisition. Before we get started, let me just take a sip of water for a sec. Okay, let's get into the next one. Acquisition. By acquisition, in this case, I'm referring to getting exposure to a language to the point where you are able to understand what is being said or use them without thinking about it, just like your Japanese. So, according to Stephen Klashin's input hypothesis, we acquire language when we understand messages. And this is what is called comprehensible input, right? So, when we talk about acquisition, we often talk about understanding because acquisition is all about understanding, right? So, but this time around, I want to talk about acquisition from the output perspective. So, think about it. Think about a child. At first, when they hear someone saying when they hear someone say something, what is going on in their head is that they are trying to like make influences about what their parents and the people around them are saying based on the situations and gestures and other context clues, right? But at first they don't understand like the question of questions they are being asked or the message of what their parents and what their message of what their parents and people are saying to them. Like I often come across a video where a baby answers yes to every questions. Like, you don't like mommy? Yes, right? You don't like daddy? Yes, right? Do you want to get bitten by a bag? Yes, stuff like that. This clearly shows that they don't understand the message of what they are being asked, right? But by the time they're 2 years old, they already understand the message of the questions. So, but here's something really interesting. When you watch a video like this, you might notice that they start speaking, they start answering the questions in the same way their parents speak to them. So, for example, if their parents say things like, ご飯食べようね right? お水飲もうね トイレ行こうね stuff like that. What usually happens is that they mimic the same tone and phrasing. Like, お腹すいたね right? トイレ行こうねご飯食べようね right? Stuff like that. And I think they are not trying to mimic what their parents are saying. I mean, this is my view of how language acquisition works, so please don't take this as a guarantee, okay? This is for my knowledge. Don't take this as a guarantee, okay? But I don't think they are trying to mimic what they are hearing. They can't help but pick it up subconsciously. They can't help but mimic what they are hearing, what their parents are saying to them. So this applies to our English learning. So have you ever heard a story where someone stays with a family who happens to have a thick accent, maybe like a very specific regional accent, and when they return to their country, they speak their target language in the same thick accent, right? I hear stories like this quite often, and I don't think they want to have a strong accent. Like, they can't help but pick it up subconsciously. So which means we adults are like children, like a baby. So let me say this again. Adults are also deeply influenced by the input that we get, like a baby. So, and from my first-hand experience, and like many others who has been doing immersion learning and reached an exceptionally high level in their target language, I can confidently say that we can acquire a language like a baby. Not in the same way, but close to the way they acquire their first language. I've never taken other methods for learning English, so I don't think I have the right to say anything negative about other methods. But I do believe that immersion learning is by far the best way to develop natural language ability. And the more I've heard someone who has been doing immersion learning speak Japanese, the more I've come to realize that that's definitely the case. So that's about acquisition. So now we've gotten the gist of the distinction. We're gonna get back to the main point. Okay? So the reason why we Japanese people, including me, haven't been able to speak in English after spending 6 years in school, learning English in school, is not because of the fact that we didn't get enough opportunities to speak in English classes, right? And first of all, what we do in school is nothing but learning. And like I said, learning is never gonna be enough for us to actually become able to speak in English. Learning is not gonna help us get to the level where we can express our thoughts in the same way natives do. Right? And learning means we memorize a bunch of vocabulary and grammar structures and phrasing, and then trying to use them when speaking English, right? So those knowledge is what we call conscious knowledge. Conscious knowledge is something something useless when we are in a situation we have to speak in English. Okay. So yeah, so learning is not gonna help us. Alright, speak in English, okay? And that was just a recap. Yeah. So the main reason why this happens is somewhat simple. We haven't cultivated intuition for English. That's the main reason. That's the main reason why we haven't been able to speak in English. Because there's a lot of countries in Europe where students speak English completely, fluently, almost like native speakers. And in their English classes, they do first of all, their English classes in Japan are completely different than English classes in those countries. So first, they give students opportunities to speak in English, which is not surprising. And what's very different from Japan, from classes in Japan, is that they do everything in English. They teach English in English, unlike Japan. So the teachers don't use their native language, and the students don't either. It's all in English, which means their students have opportunities to acquire English. The students get opportunities to know exactly how native speakers would express something in English, which means they can cultivate an intuition. They can cultivate intuition for what English is supposed to sound like. Which means they no longer need to rely on their native language. they don't need to translate their thoughts into English. Right? That's why they speak English completely fluently. And if Japanese people mimics only the first part and leave everything else the same, we will end up with a bunch of Japanese students who develop the strong habits of translating in their head when speaking English. That's what's gonna happen. And first of all, I don't think translating is the best way when speaking English. Right? We all can agree that, right? We can all agree that. And if anything, translating is something we wanna avoid, right? And most people don't know how to avoid translating when speaking English, so they have no choice but to rely on Japanese. That's what's happening in that's what is happening within an English learning community in Japan. And like I said, translating is something we want to avoid, right? And if you haven't cultivated intuition for English in the early days of learning English, you're gonna make a habit of translating in your head when you are speaking English. And immersion learning is, structures is designed in such a way that we can avoid building those kind of bad habits, when speaking English. Right? We put off speaking English in the early days of learning English. Instead of trying to speak English by translating, we spend our time getting input, cultivating our intuition for English. So, which means we can avoid building those bad habits before it's too late. And what I mean by before it's too late, let me take pronunciation as an example. So most Japanese people, including me, our pronunciations are already messed up, right? Because we read English sentences out loud, even though we didn't know exactly how they're supposed to sound, right? So we use Japanese vowels and consonants when pronouncing English words. I'm getting tired, sorry. And then once you build bad habits like this, and even if we know that that's not the correct way to pronounce English words, since it's repeated so much that it's become a habit, and which is very difficult to fix later, right? So that's what's happening when Japanese people speak in English. So there are a lot of Japanese people who are using English for decades but still have a strong accent. So that's what's gonna happen. And the only way for us to get rid of bad habits once we build them is to put conscious effort into fixing those bad habits. And it's gonna take a huge amount of time and energy to do that. So no one really wants to do that. So unless if you're like me, who has been building online presence as English learning YouTuber, or I don't know what it's called, like making videos like this on YouTube in public. So if you are not like me, so if you don't have a strong reason to fix those bad habits, you're not gonna fix them for the rest of your life. So that's what's what's the word for this? Anyway, I can't come up with it. Anyway, no, I can't think of it. Okay, so if you don't fix those bad habits once you build them, might as well avoid making those bad habits in the first place. I think that's the best way for us to go about dealing with bad habits. There is something I need to say before we get to the next section. Don't get me wrong. I used pronunciation as an example of bad habits, not because I want to tell you that we need to fix bad habits. No, I don't think we need to fix bad habit. We need to fix our pronunciation, right? The reason why I used pronunciation is because pronunciation is something that we, all Japanese people, have in common, right? Compared to like American people, like native speakers, our pronunciation is very unique, right? In a way, our pronunciation is bad. You know what I mean? But, pronunciation is something we all Japanese people, pronunciation is a bad habit we all Japanese people have in common. So that's why I used pronunciation as an example. So please don't get me wrong. We don't need to fix bad habits. Okay? Oh, sorry. We don't need to fix our pronunciation. Right? Okay. So, sorry. It took very long to get to this section. But, okay. In conclusion, if you want to become able to speak in English, what you need to focus on is not memorizing a bunch of vocabulary, not trying to practice speaking English by translating, like this is about learning, right? But getting exposure to English to know exactly how native speakers would say something, which means by watching YouTube videos and dramas and I don't know, like anything, and reading books to cultivate an intuition for what English is supposed to sound like. That's what you need to do. Okay? And if your goal is to become able to communicate with someone in English, and you don't care about how you express your thoughts in English, then you don't need to worry about anything what I've said in this video, right? But if you wanna become able to get to the point, like I said, get to the point where you can express your thoughts in the same way natives do, that's what you need to do. Okay? I think that's it. Thanks so much for sticking with me to the end. This video must be very long, so I appreciate it. And also, if you are interested in joining the community, please watch the next one. Okay? Please watch the next video. Okay? Yeah, if you found this video useful, interesting, I don't know, useful and encouraging, please give this video a thumbs up. And if you know someone who wants to become able to speak in English, please share this video with them. Like this video might help them. Okay? I think that's it. So thank you so much for sticking with me to the end. And I'll see you in the next video.